Thanks. So you guys have had some amazing speakers tell you about some of the tactics of growth hacking. And I could spend time on that too, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to talk about the 10 other things that you need to think about as you're trying to build a consumer unicorn, or frankly, any billion-dollar business. We talk about consumer unicorns because that's frankly been what I've done for my career as an entrepreneur and as an angel investor, now a venture investor. I put this up briefly just to kind of give you some of my credentials that I kind of know. Well, I've been very lucky, and I kind of know what I'm talking about with my experience. These are the kind of companies that I've either helped found, worked at, or invested in. Bebo was an $850 million exit to AOL, 2008, third largest social network at the time. Tango is a company that's still a private company, but recently had a $200 million investment from Alibaba, valuing the company at over $1.5 billion. And I was the first seed investor and acting COO. MBCI goes way back. Does anyone even remember MBCI? Oh, excellent. There's a few. Great. So that was a company that was spin out of CNET, and NBC bought, and we went public, and it was a $6 billion IPO back in '99, and then about 6 months later, it was down to about $500 million. Unfortunately, we sold that one back to GE. Of course, what I don't list up here are all the companies that either went to zero or weren't successful, but we could talk about that another time. Very briefly, I want to tell you about what we do at Maven, but so you know the sort of the hat that I wear as an investor. We are an exclusive investor in consumer startups. We've been fortunate to co-invest with Dave in 500 startups in several of our companies, and we love doing that. Early stage, and you can see on the bottom, some of our companies are a little bit later stage. You might have heard, and you heard Andy earlier from Wealthfront. We're an investor in Wealthfront, and some other great companies. So the first thing that we always talk about when we talk about how to build a great consumer startup, or frankly any startup, is you have to have a vision worth fighting for, right? And what does that mean? We've actually blogged about in great detail what that means, because we spent a lot of time in that first meeting with entrepreneurs. It's a couple things. First of all, it's a great idea. It's solving a big consumer problem. It's something that you are personally passionate about, you and your team, and you're credible. Like, there's a reason why you're going to be successful there. And then the other piece is it's a big enough market opportunity that's a venture investment. We hear great ideas all the time, but they may not be an opportunity to build a billion-dollar company. And what we've learned as an investor, and what I learned as an entrepreneur for 20 years, is you might as well try and build a billion-dollar company, because it's just as hard to do that as it is to build, a $10 million company. And so the last piece, though, then this is what I want you guys to remember and write down. The one thing that most of you never think about, most of us never think about is, so yes, it's a great idea, it's something I'm passionate about, it's a billion-dollar opportunity. Is someone else doing that in the marketplace today that has traction that's good enough? And that's really hard, because we try to convince ourselves, I don't want to pick on some companies, but like Yelp or Craigslist, they're terrible products and I could do it better. But the truth is they built a massive brand. They already have tens of millions of happy customers, and they're happy enough. It's not that you can't do it, but it becomes really hard. Now, here's an example of a company that did do that, right? Texting was around for a while before WhatsApp came around. But in some cases, you can do something so good and solve such a niche issue that it can scale massively. It happens, but we like the companies like Snapchat, where they actually create a new idea, right? One of the insights of Snapchat that we see today in hindsight is that young adults were texting. That was their basic form of communication. And the reality is that every one of their messages were lasting forever. That's kind of a weird thing. Like when I grew up, we talk on the telephone, you hang up, it's gone forever, right? Or emails and you delete them. But why should these communications last forever? Snapchat came around and said, oh, well, there's ephemeral messaging. And on top of that, you could send a picture that goes away, so it's a really fun form of communication. Boom, they've created this now billion-dollar market opportunity. I'll give you an example. When we started Tango, we looked at the video conferencing and calling space, and we looked at Skype. We're like, wow, that's solving a big problem on the web. And then in 2007, we saw the smartphones coming out, and we made a bet. We said, everybody's going to be using their smartphones instead of the web, and so we're going to do sort of this video conferencing cross-platform on the mobile device. That was kind of our big vision we're fighting for. The team were video folks. We were passionate about it. So all good, big market opportunity. Nobody was doing it good enough, and this is another lesson to learn, that we were going after a new platform. The big risk that we were going to face is, number one, how quickly were these new devices going to scale? And number two, would someone else like Skype or potentially one of the platform manufacturers like Apple or Google do their own Skype competitive product? Well, we took the risk. So we were about 2 weeks from shipping. The iPhone came out, and then I'll never forget, I was at the Apple event announcing it. And Steve Jobs, part of his keynote that morning was how they're going to launch this thing called FaceTime, which was essentially Tango. And we were like, uh-oh, I guess that was a good idea. We're screwed. But we didn't give up. We kept working. We knew we were going to ship. We were hoping things would work out. And then something amazing happened. This almost never happens. We were very, very lucky. Steve Jobs made a beautiful commercial and promised the world that these devices would be able to talk to each other. You could talk with a Skype-like product, FaceTime. But does anyone remember the iPhone 3G? It only worked on Wi-Fi. And it didn't work from your Apple phone to your friend's Google phone or your Android phone. So when Tango came out 2 weeks later, boom, we solved the problem that Steve Jobs promised the world. And literally without any marketing spend, we went to top 10 in the App Store. And to this day, 6, 7 years later, we have been in top 10 without spending any money. So it was kind of part of the plan, and we got lucky. We'll talk about luck later on a little bit. So one of the things that it's just as critical as your vision, is the founding team. And I'm going to give an example of the founders of Bebo when I met them. Michael and Sochi Birch, great product designers, engineers, and I came along sort of as the marketing and business partner, and together we built a really successful company. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but obviously the founding team is a critical piece. And one of the things that that I learned through that relationship with Michael and Sochi is that the culture piece is just as important. And something that we talk to all of our startups about is, when you're building a company and you're just 2 or 3 people in the beginning, or now maybe you're 10 or 12 people, you have a culture. There is an existing culture of your company. And what we tell our startup, and I think what many of you do, hopefully, if not, you should do it today, write down on a piece of paper what your culture of your company is. And why is that important? Well, it actually helps keep the founding team together. You're all on the same page as far as how you want to run this company. More importantly, as you're bringing in your new employees, the first thing you should hire for is culture fit rather than skills. And that's a big mistake that we see over and over again. This is the smartest guy. He's going to be awesome in this company. He's going to just kill it on the engineering side. And he turns out that it's the wrong kind of person to bring in the company. And that could be really divisive for a very small company early on. So I give an example here of what, we actually did this at Maven Mentors. We're a small team. Sarah is here. She was working with me. And we put this together as an example. And it's a process. It takes a couple of days to think about it and talk about it. But once you do it, it really is magical. So I highly recommend that. So obviously, there's been a lot of talk about product market fit and consumer growth hacking at this conference. Like I said earlier, many great speakers on the tactics. One of the things I just want to mention is that, and maybe this is so obvious we don't say it anymore, but it's not necessarily a great idea to try and do growth hacking techniques like you've heard until you think you've got product market fit. All right, so think about that. If you don't have product market fit and you're trying to growth hack it, right, you're wasting your time. Make sure that you have a sense of who your customers are, that they're enjoying your product. There's some metrics. There's no magic, but there's some metrics like 30%, 70% have downloaded your app, 30% are coming back at least once a week. You've got hundreds or thousands of customers. You're onto something. Now maybe it's time to think about, looking at some of those growth hacking techniques. The other thing that I also want to point out, and this is unfortunate news because we hear this all the time, what's the one secret that got Tango to have 300 million customers in 7 years? 300,000 new customers every day without spending any money. There isn't any one thing that works across every company, unfortunately. And frankly, a lot of the things that used to work don't work anymore, right? So the good news is, though, a lot of people have blogged about what had worked, and that's your starting point. Figure out how you can take what has worked, apply it to your particular business in the channels where you think you can achieve some growth, and experiment. And it's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of iterations. So the other thing that is really important, especially on the consumer side, and I think it goes for any company, is what we call the language market fit. And it's just as important as a product market fit. So what do we mean by this? Well, the language market fit starts with the name of your company. We actually spend a lot of time thinking about what to call these businesses. It's really important for the consumer side. And as much time, how do you describe this business? If you're doing something that we'd like to invest in, it's likely, like Snapchat, people don't even know why they need it or what you're solving. So what you call it and how you describe it within a sentence is absolutely critical so the consumer, when they're coming in for the first time, with the product UI, understands exactly what they need to do and what it's doing. So I'll give you a quick example of Tango. I don't want to pick on them, but since they're doing well, I will. When I met with the founders early, they wanted to call the company Skiggle. It was a terrible name, right? I mean, you hardly could say it. You couldn't spell it. And so it took a long time, but we spent a lot of time. We came up with a name that we thought resonated with what we were doing and that could be memorable. Obviously, I give examples of what Facebook has done with their language market fit, and it becomes part of your brand. So it's something to really spend a lot of time on. And it's actually counterintuitive to a lot of tech startups because many of our great tech startups are run by an engineering team, which is great. Part of our founding team concept, by the way, is that there's at least one great engineer who's going to be a founder in charge. Because at the end of the day, even though these look like very lightweight consumer companies, there's really hard tech that often goes into this. But with that said, if you're a tech-driven or an engineering-driven company, you may not have the comfort or skills to think about language market fit. So if you don't, make sure you bring in a company, a team, a person, a consultant to help you through that. And once you get it, by the way, it's also magical on the marketing side. If you're fortunate to get scale and get some press, you don't have to keep rethinking every time, what am I going to say about my company this time? You actually have talking points. You stick to your talking points, and you stay focused, which is the next slide. So focus, focus, focus. It really is so critical for any startup. This is something that we get literally every day. We'll see about 2,500 companies a year for our 15 investments at Maven. And one of the things that we often see is a great sort of enterprise background engineer who has a good consumer idea, who's excited. We're like, that's great. We love that fit. The problem is that they're going to come and say, what we're going to do is we're going to launch on the enterprise side, and then kind of at the same time, we're going to morph into the consumer piece. And the reality is, and I always say it's like, do yourself a favor. Don't do that. Choose one, right? Because 99% of the time, you're going to fail at both if you try and do both. But if you choose one, you actually have a reasonable chance of success. And the thing is that we can't ever tell you, like, often they're good ideas. We can work and partner with these big companies we have relationships at and do white label product and scale it and get revenue right away. Or we can take the big risk and go direct to consumer and build our own brand. What should we do? I can't tell you that. But I can tell you choose one or the other. And if you choose the consumer side, come talk to us. Maybe we can help you. And the other thing to think about when you're thinking about focus is revenue. If you do choose to go down the path of consumer and you're thinking about building a hyper-growth company, there's a time and a place to focus on the revenue, and there's a time and a place not to focus on revenue. And the reality is every one of our companies that we're trying to build with hypergrowth have a business model. It's just about when you start paying attention to turning on that business model. Generally, you're going to have a small team. You're going to raise a small seed or a seed round. You have just enough money to focus on building your core business, getting the language market fit, product market fit, and growth hack it. If you try and focus at the same time on your revenue and your business model, again, you're likely going to fail at both. And over and over again now, we don't have, it used to be we had to really explain this, but now with the examples of Instagram being bought for $1 billion with zero revenue, or Tango having $1.5 billion valuation with hardly any revenue, although now I should let you know, it's not disclosed, but the revenue numbers of Tango are off the charts, right? There's 300 million people with high engagement. You can make a lot of money, and that's always part of the plan. The other thing that is something that I observed being a mentor at many different great accelerator programs like 500 Startups is that we meet with teams and they get a lot of advice. You guys get a lot of advice. And it's always with good intention, right? The problem is that it's not always the right person giving you the right advice. So be very careful of what we call mentor whiplash. Choose the one or two or three people that have either built the kind of companies that you're trying to build or that you really click with and you can trust, and will let you know when they just don't know and they're not going to give you advice. Because we like to give back. We want to give you advice. We want to help you out, even for free, right? It's just part of this whole Silicon Valley culture. But you as the founder, founders, you have to be careful about who you're listening to. If you've got someone who's a billionaire who built some SaaS enterprise big data company trying to advise you on how to do consumer growth, you should think twice. Even though he's really smart and successful, may not be the right person to give you advice. And similarly, as you're thinking about who to bring on board as your investors, make sure that these are the right kind of people. Your investors are going to be with you for a long time. It's like a relationship. It's like a marriage. And once they put the money in, that's it. And so make sure that the kind of investors that are going to keep backing you, that know how to be supportive, do your diligence. Talk to people. Talk to other founders that they've worked with. Obviously, we love working with 500 startups. We're an investor in AngelList. That's another place you guys. Is everyone familiar with AngelList? You guys, if you have, if you don't have an AngelList profile, you might want to do that. There's syndicates, so you can even raise money now through syndicates on AngelList. I'm not going to talk about that in great detail now, but I'm happy to talk about that after. And then this is the last slide I have. It's the reality is, you can do all those 9 other things great. You can be a great tactical growth hacker, but the truth is that the vast majority of you achieving unicorn status or hypergrowth and billion-dollar status is going to be about luck and timing, which is kind of frustrating and scary. The good news is if you do all those other things, you're much more likely to be able to see and create this luck and to actually achieve the hypergrowth status and a successful exit. And it said, like, the harder I work, the luckier I get. It's true. And the thing that remember is that keep your eyes open for those opportunities. I'll give you an example at Bebo. And Bebo is probably the luckiest company that I ever worked at. Great team. I love the team. And but here I could go on like 10 stories at Bebo. I'll give it one. We were scaling at the beginning, and it was great. The strategy was very simple. Our vision was to build the largest social network in Europe, in English-speaking Europe. Simple idea. No one was out there. I was a Friendster. I knew all the guys at Facebook and MySpace. They were focused on the US. MySpace just sold to News Corp. Facebook was going to go public. If we became the 3rd largest in the US and the largest in English-speaking Europe, that's a $1 billion business. Pretty simple. And we were going to focus on high school and college. So we did it. And the other thing that we did is we didn't do, we were using Oracle database at the time. Some of the new database systems weren't scaling for our competitors. So we thought, oh, let's go with Oracle. And we were the only new tech company that was working with Oracle. So they loved us. They gave us a lot of great pricing and help. Everything was working great. We hit 10 million customers pretty quickly. And then one day we get in the office and the site didn't work. It just stopped working. The database failed. And this, I lived through Friendster, which could have been the $100 billion exit social network company. And I've written a white paper on why Friendster failed and Facebook won. But one of the key things is the technology didn't work. So this is my Friendster moment all over again. I thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? So we didn't just stay and feel sorry for ourselves. We took action. I had a friend who was a senior executive at Oracle. I called him. I said, we need help. Our site's not working. We know it's a database Oracle issue. And then amazingly, he calls me back in 5 minutes. We found the guy who we think can help fix this. There's one guy in the world who can fix this. Like, oh my God, this is great. Great, where is he? We're going to drive over there right now. He's in the UK. We're like, oh God, all right. So what are we going to do? So we got it. Somehow we tracked down his email. We sent him an email. And he emails us back right away. It was like, in the middle of the night. He's back. He goes, we sent him our database code. And he's like, I took a look at it. I think I know what the problem is. Silence. We're like, we email back, okay, what's the problem? Can you fix it? How much? And our site is down. We've got one of those like fail whales going on. We had a hamster, thing going, and it's killing us. So he emails back. He's like, you know what? You couldn't afford me, and I'm just not that interested. Silence. So I was like, Michael, I'm getting on a plane. We're going to find this guy, and we're going to make sure he fixes this. And I was getting on a plane the next morning as soon as we could. The next morning, we get up. This is like 3 or 4 hours later. We're not sleeping all night. The site, he sends us a piece of code, like out of the blue. He sends a piece of code. We implement it, and the site starts working. Unbelievable. Like, what happened? He never communicated. He just sent us the code. He's like, here's what the problem is. Here, I fixed it for you. And we fixed it, and it worked. Never had a problem since. So we finally got on a call with him. We're like, thank you so much. How much will you say? Don't worry about it. It's like, well, what happened? You didn't want to help us? And then he's like, well, last night, this morning, we got out for breakfast, and my daughter came down. She's 15. By the way, at that time, everyone in the UK, and literally 90% of UK, Ireland, UK, and Australian teenagers were on Bebo. It was like right? So his daughter came down for breakfast and said, Dad, I'm really frustrated. I can't communicate with my girlfriends because the site Bebo's down. He's like, oh, those guys contacted me. so she's like, well, go fix it. She said, wait, what's going on? Can you fix it? He's like, yeah, I told him I couldn't do it. She said, Dad, if you don't fix it, I'm leaving the family. So he fixes it for free. You guys need that kind of luck to achieve $1 million status. Let me just stand on this slide because we love to meet you. Sarah, my colleague, and I will stick around for as long as it takes to meet every one of you if you want to talk to us. But this is what all we ask. If you could think about, if you're a consumer startup and you want to talk to us, think about what your vision is, that it's worth fighting for in that kind of order that I was talking about. Pitch to us in 30 seconds, and we could tell you if this is something that we could be happy to learn more about at another meeting. So thank you very much for your time.